It's now 4:30 and time for a work session on political updates and lobbying. And I'll turn it over to the city manager right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for being here for this meeting. The purpose of the meeting this evening is to talk about our legislative priorities. However, I wanted you to meet our lobbyist firm and have them here in person to talk to you about what's going on at the state level. And of course, we ask them what they think of our projects and how it fits into the mix of what's going on with the state. So we'll start with them. You have our proposed priorities or very draft priorities before you as well, and it'll kind of all fit and come together. But we'll start with these guys.
Great, thanks, Jeanette. For those of you who don't know, my name is Chris Noss. I'm the managing partner at Confluence Strategies. I reside in Anchorage, but with Laura Steidoff in Juneau. We do primarily state work. We do some work with our federal delegation as well, just from the years. I have been lobbying actually since 2006. Prior to that, I was the deputy chief of staff for then Governor Frank Murkowski. It seems like a long time ago. And then was chief of staff to the Speaker of the House. And Laura will talk a little bit about her term here in the last couple of years. But we do, represent a lot of different industries. We touch a lot of different areas, from native corporations to oil, gas, mining, transportation. So we're in a lot of the major discussions, not only from our side in the legislative side of the legislative session, but we both have executive branch experience, which I think is really kind of adds a whole nother layer of what we do and how we kind of approach things from a strategic standpoint. But we are really looking forward to working with you all and hope that we can make some progress on some of your priorities this year. We've taken a look at them already, and some look like they're very doable. Some are going to be kind of dependent on a little bit of the weather in Juneau. And we actually think some can be grant driven. So I'll turn over to Laura and let you go for it.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Laura Steidoff. Sorry. It's really nice to be here in the Kenai and in Soldotna specifically. I got my start in politics with Representative Olson about 15 years ago. So Soldotna has a near and dear place in my heart, and so I'm happy. And so it's nice full circle to be, I just got off my year cooling off period. I was Governor Dunleavy's legislative director for the first 2 years of his second term. So I've been with Chris the last year, just laying low, staying out of the Capitol, and I'll be back in January. But prior to that, I worked for the legislature for about a decade, and then also was in private industry for a little bit with GCI doing government affairs. So yeah, ready to kick this off. So looking forward, if you've been paying attention to the legislature at all in the last couple of years, you've probably noticed that education funding has been the big debate in the room. This last year, the legislature overrode the governor for the first time since Tony Knowles, and then also for the first time since the mid-'80s on an appropriation veto this last summer. And that was increasing the BSA to a flat $700 figure. And so, this debate's going to carry on into this legislature. There's an education task force which has a report due to the legislature at the beginning of 2027. So after the governor is gone. However, I think that this is going to consume a lot of time in the legislature, as well as this fiscal cliff we've been talking about for years. We may be finally getting there, but the budget this year was based on $68 a barrel of oil. We're left with about, I think, $2.1 billion in the CBR, and oil's been hovering around $63, $64 a barrel. So every dollar is about 30 to 40 million, depending out of the state budget for every dollar we lose. So, we seem to get saved by conflicts the last couple of years, but I think that the legislature is ready to start talking about revenues now. However, the governor is not as interested in new tax measures. However, last 2 years I was with him, he's willing, I know, to, as long as everybody feels the heat a little bit, whether it's a piece of oil tax restructuring, a broad-based sales tax, and then a reorganization of how the dividends paid out. But to get that done in this next session, I think is very unlikely.
I think just to add to that, I think it's also important to know that a lot of school districts are also dealing, right now, there's an argument about the Anchor School District pertaining to the school debt reimbursement rates being reduced by 50%. That was an issue about 4 to 5 years ago, but that's going to really impact how school districts plan and execute certain debt, certain funding. The other thing, just to add in terms of fiscal planning, the governor's office is working on a fiscal plan. They're working on, I think, primarily a sales tax, which, from a local government standpoint, I think that's not a one-year project. That's a multi-year project. We've seen these proposals come out year after year. There's usually a line of exemptions that come with them, and Ellen trying to work with the governments already have a sales tax in place. It becomes a little trickier. So I'm not saying that we're blowing it off, but what I'm saying is I think it's a very high bar to think that they're going to get revenue measure past this session.
Agreed. So not to be doom and gloom, but all that to say, I think we're looking at a pretty contentious legislative session between the legislature and the governor. I'd expect to see some more EOs probably rolling out, and hopefully not a summer full of special sessions, but that is something that has been communicated to the legislature. I can go to the next slide.
So before we go
Mhm.
into priorities, so with particularly the number of senators that are now going to be running for governor and have resigned or are resigning, it'll be interesting to see because it's going to be completely new dynamic in the Senate and in the House, since the governor will be appointing those folks as well.
The appointments should stay consistent, but we're expecting the Senate to most likely confirm George Rauscher. Rauscher gets the Senate seat. And then Captain Tilton, once Shelley Hughes resigns, those are 2 House members that go to the Senate. I think the challenge is going to be more in the House, because you're going to get 2 new representatives that are still a bit unknown. The House is a 21-19 majority. So I think the real issue is probably will survive. It gives the governor a little bit more leeway because a lot of those appointments feel an obligation, at least to the administration, the appointment until the election cycle. But I think that, you also, from a Senate standpoint, Senate has always been pretty stable. And it's been a bipartisan coalition. If you're looking at the 26 election cycle, your Senate is basically 9 Democrats, 9 Republicans, and we have 2 incoming with potentially Louise Stutes and Bryce Edmond. So those 2 will carry a lot of weight going into organization structure in terms of the Senate. And so it is going to play a major role, and I think the House will most likely stay a coalition. But again, in 26, you have ranked choice voting potentially on the ballot for a second chance or opportunity to overturn. And what's interesting about ranked choice voting is the major funders that were pro-ranked choice voting, the Arnold Foundation, is no longer funding that fight. And the opposition actually has national funding. So when it was a $15 to $1 million spend election cycle to maintain RCV, I think it's going to be a very different dynamic. So to keep that in place, which, we can talk politics forever, but it's going to create problems for the 28 cycle for people like Elise Murkowski. Because what could happen is the primaries, right now we have an open, quote, jungle primary, and that would potentially go back and close those primaries at the fourth state.
So we just made this slide to kind of show where we're at with capital projects in the state. $2.2 billion backlog is obviously very significant. And then, you know, the $739 million figure, that's actually based on 2023 calculations. So I believe that number has gone up since then. And then aside from that, you also have the SIP for Department of Education. So the major maintenance grant fund still has, you know, $401 million in projects for schools that have significant damage. You know, we were looking at, the other issue that we're running up on right now this session is the typhoon. So there's going to be conversations about that. We're getting $25 million from the federal government. The study that was done last year on an event like this occurring in the region, estimates were, you know, about $4 billion to start relocating those villages. So that's another conversation that's going to be happening this next year with no easy answers.
And just to kind of add to the education discussion is, you know, we're hearing a lot that, you know, the legislature overrode the governor in terms of for base student allocation. There's a lot of discussion in and around lawsuits. There's already lawsuits happening because it's the state's constitutional obligation to fund public education. But also what falls into that is the major maintenance list for schools. So this is where the state could potentially have some really significant exposure, particularly in rural Alaska, over their obligation, just for awareness.
You have the next slide. So, you know, this next midterm elections, I think will be very lively with the governor's race. We already have 12 Republicans in, 2 Democrats. Senator Clayman just entered the race on Monday. You have all of the House, half of the Senate. And like Chris mentioned, you know, this could potentially be the last ranked choice voting cycle that we have. So that makes it, I think, even more heated. And then we also have 4 ballot initiatives. I believe that 2 of them have been certified at this point. So that is ranked choice and open primaries, and then requiring that only U.S. citizens may be qualified to vote. And the other 2 are still waiting signatures.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to add, just on that, particularly the legislature, is the state Senate's going to lose 2 of the most senior members in the legislature. One's been in since '85, Lyman Hoffman, and also Gary Stevens, the Senate president. So it's, that is going to create a very big void in terms of how the Senate has operated the last 20 years, just for awareness. I don't really know who is leading, but if you look at the governor's race and you think about what they call the jungle primary, in order for a candidate to advance the top 4 to get to the ranked choice selection, you're looking at potential success of only about a 10% vote count in order to advance based on all those things. You have to figure that with, you know, 30% Democratic voting, you think that the 2 Democrats would advance. So the question is, you know, does Dave Bronson, because he has name ID, represent the city of Anchorage, you know, who fits that other, you know, those other 2 components? You know, do the Democrats pull out of America Tolo gets in? So there's a lot of things that could happen. And what I would say is that, you know, the way this works is that they have to have a governor and lieutenant governor locked in on a ticket by June 1, 26. Until then, everything is very fluid. So we could see a lot of those names move to lieutenant governor tickets as well.
Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
And probably we can expect some more people filing for those positions.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, June 26th is a ways out. I think through the session, I think it's interesting that, you know, the 2 senators from the Matsu Valley are resigning. It's kind of a mixed thought process on that, but I'm not sure that Matt Clayman will resign, but I'm expecting that Tom Schwartz improv. I think the $1 million question is, does Mary Peltola get the Senate race, which from her perspective is a lot faster way to raise money. And she's polling very well against Sullivan, but in the same sense, her chance to win a gubernatorial election or ranked choice voting is probably an easier task, but a harder task to raise money. So I think that's going to be some of the interesting discussions here next.
move on to the priorities.
All right. We'll move on to the legislative priorities and we'll walk through them and get the thoughts on why, one, why they're priorities. The department directors are here to answer any questions about the priorities as well. Some of them we've had for last couple of years. And then a few that are new to us. So why don't we go ahead and start? Go ahead.
I'll ask the question.
Okay, great. Soldotna Public Library improvements, as you know, there has and on our CIP, we've had it would be a design study that was funded last year. There was an appropriation, a separate appropriation for that. And this is the funding that would be for the cost for the library improvements itself. This is coming forward. As far as I actually, I'll keep going and then I want to have you, you guys speak to the thresholds and why the dollar amounts are here. Obviously, there are projects that we desire, but there's specific reasons for the dollar amounts and what we've chosen. Memorial Park improvements, this was a project from last year, as you're aware of, and it carries forward from last year. Reconstruct Marydale Avenue. This is on the priorities. However, it is also included in CDS funding. I was going to report on this in the regular meeting, but here we are. I'll go ahead and speak to it. I just received, and you guys probably all did through any notifications, but this came from Genevieve, and she said the House has passed a bill to reopen the government, ending the longest shutdown in U.S. history. She went on to speak about the vote, but for me, the CR joined to pass a CR continuing resolution to January 30th, which also includes funding agriculture, military construction, VAs, and the legislative branch. So that through the agricultural part of things, I wonder if that went through, but that, yeah, our CDS funding is still in. We'll see where that goes. Still not assured, but still in, and that's through Marydale. And we kept this on. We want to keep this as a priority just in case it does not get funded through CDS funding.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Just to clarify on the CDS funding on that, does that cover just the actual road reconstruction or does that cover the utility reconstruction as well?
That is just the road construction is the 3.9. This year we added the utilities, which is on the bottom of page 5 for 900,000.
Thank you for that confirmation.
Sure. pH control at the wastewater treatment plant. And again, if you have any questions about the projects themselves, like the project itself and not just the funding part, please let us know. We have CO as the project manager to speak to it and then the department heads. But pH control at the wastewater treatment plant, which is new to us on our legislative priority. It's on the CIP. It's been on the CIP, but project cost of $600,000. Also new on the priorities, the Headwork screw pump project cost $650,000. You know, I'm actually going to pause here for both of these, more so the screw pump so that Rob can speak to it. You know, I had an education the other day about what a screw pump is, so I thought it'd be great to share that. If you want to come up, how about just right here to this microphone here? You'll need to turn it on.
Okay, so the screw pumps are in the Headworks building. It's where all the influent comes to the plant. There are 3 screw pumps in there that have been in there, 2 since the 70s and 1 since the 90s. And it's just aging infrastructure. And we had a representative from the manufacturer come up to give us a look, and they're end of life. We don't have much time left. So the price here is for equipment only. That doesn't include construction, doesn't include any other design or anything like that. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
What does a screw pump actually do?
Oh,
Why is it
okay, so-
important?
It brings the raw sewage from a low level to a high level so it can be gravity fed throughout the plant. It is Archimedes developed, been around for thousands of years.
And what happens if it fails?
We'll have a huge lake of sewage on Kobuck Avenue. So, go ahead, yes.
I was just going to ask, I remember doing a tour of the plant some years ago and it was kind of fascinating to see these. And I remember having discussion about the Archimedes pumps, and the whole reason we have those is because they're just dead simple. There's very little that can go wrong with them. It's just literally a screw and a motor that turns things
That's
up.
it.
So what exactly is going on with them? I mean, I could see a motor going wrong. You'd swap that out, but the actual screw itself, I guess maybe it rusts or cracks, deteriorates. But I have a hard time wrapping my mind around how it can cost
So on the
$650,000 to
exterior,
replace those.
There's wear rings, and over time they just deteriorate. And
Got
it's
it.
hard to replace and construct that on site. It's
Mhm.
extremely difficult.
You kind of have to tear around the enclosures around them when you do this
Right.
then.
And the
Okay,
interior flights are deteriorated.
got it. Okay.
If this just is the equipment, what would the additional construction and installation be?
And that's, can you come up to a microphone, please? Yeah, there you go.
First, I'd like to point out, we do have 3 of these screw pumps in the plant. So we have good redundancy. This is not we're not living dangerously. They're doing a good job of the plant, and we have redundancy. So this is not an emergency, but it is something we have to take care of. Oh, yeah, and this number here, this is very preliminary. We've just been working with the manufacturers. We had this $650,000. That's the replacement, just the materials for 1 screw pump. And so we're really just guessing, but I would bet it's probably $1 million by the time you're all in with all the actual construction work to install that pump for 1 of them. We have 3 of these pumps. Then we have to make the decision, do we do all of them at the same time? Do we just do 1? You know, if we're gonna do all 3 of them, it's probably a $2 million, $2.5 million project. So this is still early planning stages. We have to decide what the best approach is here.
And I do want to emphasize too that as you know, with our projects, we've always taken a regional approach, and we do feel that obviously this is regional for our residents, but also the hospital, the schools, and would serve the citizens outside of our city.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a
Go
follow-up?
ahead.
So since this is related to operations with our wastewater treatment plant, is there any potential opportunity for bonding for this with loans through, I believe it was DEC that we've used for other projects with the plant in the past that we either can get subsidies on or potentially forgiveness with?
I'm not sure about the state revolving loan fund, if this is one of those. Okay, great.
Sorry, Chris Noss. I think there is, just kind of discussing this, I think that there are some EPA funds that have passed through to DEC in terms of wastewater and sewage that would
Mhm.
fit kind of the maintenance
Mhm.
and the repair. And if you have a number of the screws, the 3, that could be a 1 a year or something like that. But I think what I would do is I would actually reach out to DEC and see what,
Mhm.
make sure that we do qualify before we go start
Certainly.
lobbying this.
I would hope we'd explore that if at all possible.
Great. And putting it in our legislative priorities allows us to, that proves the support for that type of funding as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Parker?
So would EPA or DEC for the pH control for the treatment plant potentially? there
Yeah,
could
Water
be-
Division, I think would
Mhm.
have those grants, and clean water grants would come through EPA.
Okay. All right, so the next one is the big one, through the replace the ice arena refrigeration system. And you've been given the ice system evaluation study, and we've spoken about it before. We continue to meet internally to meet our goal to have a report to you. I believe we are talking about February timeframe to have a report with recommendations. Again, thinking, well, obviously this is a regional facility, but also being able to pursue any and all opportunities, and I say it that way, not quite sure what those are right now, but having as a legislative priority is important. So, having this adopted as a priority. We will speak about this with our state and federal legislators, knowing that, as we've already learned, there's not a lot of funding out there, but this does open the opportunity for us to seek other funding for this project as well. Joel is here in case there are any questions on the project itself.
The- Does this $9.5 million figure include the upgrades to the humidifier and things like that, or is this just strictly for the refrigeration unit? That's a little bit higher than what I had heard at one time.
Yeah, the dehumidification system, we're waiting on a report back, should be next week or soon. It's a pretty small addition to what this would be. This includes the refrigeration system, the floors, the concrete floors, the boards, and the glass. So this would be everything we would need in the next, 3 to 5 years or whatever the timeline is, that is sort of reaching end of life. The crucial part right now is the refrigeration system, which is about 5 million, depending on what system we think is the right choice. And then the additional 4.5 million would be the boards, the glass, and the dehumidification system.
Go ahead.
So is the plan to keep it at Olympic size? I'd heard other potential configurations within the ice arena.
Yeah, so most of the Olympic rinks are shrinking. The Carlson Center in Fairbanks just did that last year. They went from an Olympic sheet to an NHL sheet. It would be up to council and the community on what we felt was the best need. The Brown Bears, I talked to them this week, actually. They don't have an opinion. They just want to know sooner than later, because you actually build a different type of team if you have a big sheet versus a little sheet. Ours, they try to go fast and skilled. If you have a smaller sheet of ice, you can go big and brawny because you don't have to skate as far. So they just want to have a heads up.
So the teams that the Brown Bears play against in the other communities, what size rinks are those guys playing on?
They're all smaller at the NHL size.
So it's my side hustle, I'm the vice president of USA Hockey. So I will tell you that the Anchorage rink is an Olympic sheet of ice, the Sullivan Arena, and the Fairbanks rink is an NHL sheet. And personally, from a operational standpoint and getting more teams up here, you should look at going to an NHL sheet ice. I never have used my hockey sense, so I apologize.
Yeah.
No, that it's good information since you're in that world. And I did want to add the 9.5 is, as Joel spoke about, with all of, we call it table 1, 2, 3, 5 is, I have a spreadsheet with that. And that's the 2028 cost, because within the report, they project it out to 2028. So the 9.5, and then the dehumidification is not in that cost at this time.
Would going to a smaller sheet reduce the costs at all?
Those costs, I believe, are already at the NHL size. It would, in theory, it'll decrease our operation cost by about, it's 20% smaller. So it's 20% less of everything, less ice, less time, less electricity. So there would be a reduction in our operating cost. But this construction is based off of going smaller.
Mr. Chilson?
So the construction of this facility far predates my time with the city, but I'm assuming that we got state funding for this back during the time when oil money was blowing like crazy. Was this bonded by the city, or is this a legislative grant back in the day?
Well, it was built 40 years ago, and based on that time frame being 40 years, I almost want to say it was a legislative grant, because that's about the time the money was.
Exactly. That'd be my assumption as well.
Project 80s, right?
Right.
The money was coming in.
Yeah.
They built what was called the Fire Lake facility in Eagle River. Now it's called McDonald Center at the same time.
Got it.
Very, very similar looking facilities.
I think it would be, yeah,
Yeah,
It
it
was-
was the
it was
reason why. I
fun.
mean, here's history. So the Alaska hosted the World Junior hockey tournament at the Sullivan Arena in 1986. Those were all Olympic sheets of ice then, and that's what. it
I-
built that
I
for.
think it would be worth getting confirmation for that and whatever materials we put together to share with state legislators, really emphasizing the fact if we can confirm that, hey, this was something the state identified as a community need back when this was established and the need hasn't changed. So
Mhm.
we're just asking for support for something that you originally funded for us.
Sure. You would definitely hear more about this project. Like I said, we're meeting and we'll have further information and we'll try to find out how that was funded, go back to our documentation and a recommendation for you. Yeah, KPHA will be here. Okay, moving on to K Beach Road and Arena Avenue signalization. As you know, that was a priority from last year. And we continue to have conversations with DOT about the significance of having a signal at that intersection. And I know that these two have already had conversations with DOT about that, and we appreciate that as well. So those conversations, and every time we see a DOT person, we talk about it. So that will continue.
Did you want me to add to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just
please.
gonna tell the council that, you know, every time you bring up K Beach Road, it's always in culverts and in the borough. And so, a lot of this pertaining to signalization outside the sports center was a little bit of a new discussion with the commissioner. So he was trying to figure out if that's actually been part of the regional planning. The other thing, just for knowledge, is 2 years ago, state DOT put a planning office in the Matsu Valley. They think that's been a great success. They want to do the same thing in the next year in the Kenai Borough. And so apparently, according to the commissioner today, that the mayor of the borough has offered up off space. But I think they're looking at putting a few planners in here so that the community has boots on the ground, you know, full time, that would help move some of these things along. So they see it as a plus, and I do think that'll happen here in the next budget cycle.
And we're going to make sure that they come to a Brown Bears game and try to leave at that same time. So,
Yeah,
you know.
Yes. My follow-up question to that would be, is this common practice for municipalities have to do signalization studies for intersections off of state-maintained roadways to city-maintained roadways in other municipalities in the state? Because I feel like the onus of this should be on the state. I'm wondering if, you know, we're paying for this because we're eager to have it because it is very clearly needed, but I'm not advocating for this, but if we dragged our feet on this long enough, is there a potential the state would eventually pay for this?
Unfortunately, I mean, the city and borough of Juneau just went through this with the intersection at Fred Meyer's and the city had to pay for it.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, state road.
I think it's showing skin in the game, and I hate to say that because most likely when you go and ask for the actual funding, when it gets to that point, not just the study, then you're hoping that the other entities pick that up.
Got it.
Hey, new
Because
to,
if you think about it, it's
sorry.
not showing a community priority unless it's in the STIP or something like that.
new to the, oh, I'm sorry.
Before we leave that, is that something that the city should ask the state to include in this next round of STIP? So
I
we should,
think
Those
we've
pieces.
made that request. I'll follow up on that.
Yes, we've included this in the
Yes.
STIP previously.
Okay.
and did the state accept it?
They scored all of those projects on the STIP and it scored well. And then when it got to the final selection committee, they picked projects in the valley.
But I want to add to that because the one thing that we did not mention earlier is last June, the governor vetoed $60 million out of state DOT, which is ultimately matching state funds that match the federal funds. So we're really trying to figure out where the voids are going to be. And, you know, as you had said, you know, kind of the pick and choose. So I think that's going to be a very big issue for the legislature to try to figure out and prioritize, because the administration might be prioritizing those funds going to the Matsu Valley. The legislature might have completely different ideas where those funds should go.
Which I believe is why we've kept this on our legislative priority, really to continue the conversation, making sure that they understand our need down here. So that's part of the reason that we continue to talk about this one.
Well, and there are two projects, well, three projects if we include the bridge in Cooper Landing. But Sterling Highway from Sterling into Fred Meyer, that project's supposed to be funded and underway with project work starting next year. And then upgrades here on Kenai Spur from Kenai Auto to Strawberry to make that 5-lane. That's also supposedly the contract was signed and there's pictures of everybody signing, and that's also supposed to be getting underway if those funds are still around.
And then the match is still there. Yes, you're right. Mhm,
Those have been hanging around for years now.
mhm.
That's why I've got gray hair
And
or no hair.
Vice Mayor knows that, you know, a lot of these things too, at that 4-year point, they're eligible for reappropriations. That's what, you know, we're gonna have to make sure that we're on the ground and aware of to make sure those funds continue to be allocated to the projects that you all are still
I-
prioritizing.
One of the problems I have with DOT on their road safety or whatever they technically call it, they look at accidents and fatalities that have occurred instead of looking at what the potential is. And this particular area at the ice arena and the field house is just waiting for an accident. And, you know, I'd rather be proactive and get it done before someone gets hit, gets killed, or gets seriously injured. And that's my problem with DOT. They,
Yeah, there was an accident there, a pretty bad one earlier this fall. And we did talk today about near misses. We all know that every single day there are near misses. And of course, you know, we're not out there counting them, and DOT probably wouldn't accept that data anyway, but there are near misses every single day there.
you know, people use the center lane as kind of a pole in when technically it's not.
And I think too, you know, as we speak with our legislators and continuing that, like I said, continuing the conversation about DOT, and then what you said, Chris, then, you know, really not just, we always speak about our priorities, but when we're there talking, we'll meet with DOT as well to talk about the peninsula and how, because it all affects us.
And our Senator, Chairman of the Transportation Committee in the Senate,
Mhm.
he has a large microphone
Mhm.
on issues like this. And so let's use it.
Absolutely. Mhm. Okay, new to this, and Joel, if you'll come back up in case there are questions, please. Playground equipment at Soldotna Creek Park. This is new, and actually I'm gonna, Joel, if you would speak to the conditions of the playground equipment, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so the playground it's not that old, you know, built in 2011. The problem was that the product that was used was very cool for the community to help build, but it is not very easy to maintain. There's not a catalog that we can just order parts from, and a lot of it is wood product. And so we're rebuilding and remanufacturing a lot of things, which is not really what you want to do in a playground. And then also, Soldotna Creek Park, even 5 or 6 years ago, is not what it is today as far as the number of people going to that playground. And so oftentimes you build a playground to meet the needs of a small community. And now what we see is happening at that park, it's getting well loved a lot faster than we were expecting.
Go ahead.
And Chris and Laura, if you haven't been here in the summertime, you need to make sure to be here on a Wednesday between June and the end of August to do the Levitt Foundation Music in the Park. And yeah,
It's pretty amazing. And Joel-
Parking and pedestrians.
Right. Yes, it's amazing to have everyone in town. And like Joel says, the park is seeing a tremendous amount of use, and especially this playground equipment, which we love having the use in the playground. Project costs, we're still working on. Like I said, this is draft, so we're still working on that. That'll be inserted later. This whole document, along with the resolution, will come before you in December for your adoption. So we'll have those numbers firmed up. New to the priorities this year is the Homestead Lane construction. And actually, I'm going to turn to CO for that one. If you would speak about this project, please.
Sure. Well, this is another transportation project that's been in the works for a long time, and the city's done a lot of background work on this. We have a preliminary design. We did, gosh, I don't know, a bunch of years ago and identified how much, the exact routing, and then we worked with the landowners for a long time to purchase the right of way and replat. And so this is really, I mean, the definition of a shovel-ready project. We have the preliminary design, we own the right of way, and it's ready to go if we have the funding. And of course, I'm sure we're all aware what a great important connector piece this is for our community. All of that traffic coming off of East Redoubt and trying to make another dangerous left-hand turn, and an even pedestrian connection. This would be a pedestrian connection to, the end of our riverfront redevelopment area. It lands in the north end of that. I mean, this would be a transformative project for our community. So, any questions?
What also happens there is a lot of the traffic on East Redoubt uses the private driveways going through Fred Meyer's. And the traffic going through there is tremendous. That includes dump trucks, semis, everything. It tears up that section of the road, which belongs to Fred Meyer's, pretty bad.
Right. This is another project that we included in the STIP. And that's an important point that we brought up, is that currently that signal at Fred Meyer, that the entrance into Fred Meyer that's private drive. And there is a lot of commercial traffic going through there, but a lot of traffic that is not Fred Meyer traffic. People coming off of East Redoubt go through Fred Meyer and use that signal to access the highway. And this really building this Homestead Lane would be the right way to direct all that traffic on public roads to the signal at the Y.
And this was on the STIP, but also one that came off.
Yes, correct. And this is another one when we've, just informally spoke at conferences and so on with DOT officials. Again, they all agree this is a good traffic safety project. This would make everything work better. It would make the state highway safer and function better. And it's another one where we're kind of carrying the water, so to speak, for the state.
One question I have is when the city, works to, and this is just from my knowledge, when the city works to put something in a STIP, are we using our legislators to write letters of support asking them in the STIP? We do that here?
I believe that we did for at least a couple of the projects that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure what the process has been in the past.
Yeah, I'm not sure on this one if we've had our legislators support it or not.
We'll make sure that we
Yeah, I think it's,
do.
again, we look at the strategy.
Mhm.
It's helpful that the chair of the transportation committee asks for things to be in the STIP phrase.
Okay.
So oftentimes, like the commissioner of transportation will come to town and he'll meet with the borough mayor, but he doesn't get together with Kenai or Soldotna. And maybe next time you meet with him, might drop it in his ear that next time he's here, it would be because there are a number of projects that are impacting Soldotna directly, that the borough mayor might not have as much information or knowledge about. I know he's extremely knowledgeable and knows almost everything, but our city manager and her department heads probably would have a little bit more to add.
And last that we've included is a long-term priority is the riverfront redevelopment. We don't have an ask, but we do, as I'm sure the mayor and vice mayor can attest, when we do go speak in Juneau and in DC, we're always asked about this project. So it is on there. We're continuing to work on it internally, but we don't have an official ask for anything at this time. I wanted to ask Laura and Chris to expand on, we had this conversation about our projects, a couple that we took off and kind of talked about, what would be eligible for, I would say ripe for funding, for lack of a better term, and why. And if you would speak to the,
I think the river.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm learning here. I think for the immediate, going back to the riverfront redevelopment, immediately we see things like that. And we say, okay, we think that you could restructure that into a grant request through what they call Dingle Johnson funds, which is ADF, Alaska Department of Fish and Game funds that they receive from the federal government in terms of, riverbank restoration and rehabilitation. But you could also tie that into a larger project. So we would help, help work with the department on how that request would look rather than trying to go ask for general fund dollars in order of state, money to fund something like that when there's already grants out there. I would say the similar things for the DEC, the EPA grants that we talked about. I think from our standpoint, the way we're looking at this from a large picture is that, we don't see a lot of money flying around. And the last time that legislators had discretionary money, meaning the chairman of the finance committee saying, hey, Justin Rufford, you get $1 million for your district, and Elam, you get $1 million for yours, or whomever. And so we haven't seen that in a while because we haven't had that walking around money. And so the question is, and as things continue to build up, like you saw the slide Laura had on deferred maintenance, is the legislature in a position where they're looking at doing a general obligation bond to put on the ballot in November? I don't think that they're quite there, but I think that is definitely becoming a larger discussion point because of the needs, particularly around deferred maintenance in the state. When I say that, I also say, there's some pots of money, and everything, comes through federal in a lot of these circumstances. 40% of our economy is federally based. A lot of those funds are on hold at this point, or in waiting, or we're waiting to see if those programs actually are going to exist in the next 8 to 12 months. And so, we're looking at this from trying to be, strategic, where we might not have to, we can still keep them in caps as our priorities. I think that's important, showing that this is what the city wants. But I think there might be some backdoor discussions and some ways to strategize around just going to the legislature and saying, hey, this is our list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I will tell you right now, I'm a huge proponent of the $9.5 million for the ice rink. That's not realistic in terms of this fiscal environment. So in a GO bond, it could be. It would have to be a multi-year type of, project and expense, or some type of match, if you will. I mean, that's just the state of today. That could change if, the price of oil goes over $100 a barrel. It could change real quick. And as Laura said, kind of gave you a picture of that $40 million for every dollar up and down on an annual basis. But you're also looking at, end of year, PITCA is going to come on. That's primarily state leases, and that's going to be another 90,000 barrels a day, hopefully, in the pipeline. And then you're going to have Willow come on. And so, we're trying to get to that fiscal, we're trying to get to that place where, we actually don't need to worry about potential revenues. And the question is, I think it's probably a 30% chance they get there without new revenues, maybe. Because again, if the governor introduces his budget and puts a full statutory PFD in the budget, then we're going to start out with a, $500 to $600 million deficit like we did last year. No one takes that seriously. So the legislature then at that point is stuck with rewriting the entire budgetary process, which is not a bad thing for us. It's just, it creates more, it's just a different strategic angle to take on things.
These are our proposed priorities. Questions?
So are these in priority order, with the library taking first top priority? Or is it where we find somebody that says, oh, we like this, we'll
Right.
go for that?
Yeah, I can I answer that? So in CAPSIS, the legislative finance system, you have to prioritize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When Laura and I will go talk to legislators, if we have an opportunity to make a play, they're going to say, okay, looking at the list, okay, I'm not going to hit 9.5. What else do you need? What can we get off the list today?
Mhm.
And I think, that's something to be mindful of. The other piece is working with your partners, even though there's things not on here. what's the Kenai Peninsula School District doing? What's, where are some of the angles? We have a good relationship with Meyer Hutchinson, the lobbyist for the Kenai Borough. We pick up the phone and talk to people. And I think that's important to make sure you kind of know the environment you're working through so that, 5 people don't ask for, 8 different projects on the same community. I think that's important. So the goal is to have the legislators basically talk your script by the end of session.
And
Is-
just to throw a little context, Chris had mentioned this isn't the days of the House Finance co-chair handing out projects. There was a situation in 2023 where the House majority members were each given $1 million for capital projects within their district, which was, the Senate was just doing statewide projects. It was unorthodox. It was the way they could work it out in the House. So just to give you an idea of like, when we did have a little bit of money, they were capped out at $1 million. And I'll say that, several of those were still vetoed. So that's just like the reality, and that's when things were even a little better.
Mhm. Yeah, the sand storage, we received funding, and then also included was, and I guess we can talk a little bit about that as well, Joel, was the conference room expansion design was in, but it did get vetoed. And we've had internal conversations, and it's why you don't see it on this as a priority, but really questioning, do we need that expansion? And even if we were to receive the funding for design, we financially right now cannot complete that project. So we wanted to take that off. We'll regroup on that and then come back to you. But we're really evaluating whether that expansion is needed. And so we'll have further conversations and come back to you on that one. But that is why you don't see it on the priority this year. Even if we receive design funding financially, we cannot complete that right now.
Any other questions from the council? Comments? Anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's going to be nice to work for you. I think you folks have been getting our weekly reports. We do a federal report, we do a state report. We have as part of our other teams is we have Neil Steiniger, who's actually on the CBJ assembly, does some budgetary work for us. He's former OMB director. Chris Laddick does some work for us. He's the former EPA Region 10 administrator, former city manager in a lot of different places. So we work with a lot of different folks from different, persuasions. And I think that is helpful to try to get those other angles for success. And I think that, looking forward to having folks in Juneau here. It's time to start going down there into work. I think it's going to be a tough session all around. But I think that with that, sometimes there creates some opportunity. I don't think it's going to be a real heavy legislative year, but I think it's going to be a heavy budgetary year. And so the question is, what's that going to be? But thank you, everyone, for making the time.
Anything else to add?
Yes, as I stated, you'll have the resolution in this document back before you in December. If you have any comments, questions, anything, please reach out to me and we'll get those answered and taken care of. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And that's
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Well,
Appreciate it.
we'll end the work session.